Hi everyone, a big welcome back to my channel. Today I'm coming at you with my June recent reads. A bog standard monthly wrap up. God, it feels good to be back to normal after my booktube break. I had a great reading month in June, continuing on with my pretty amazing 2022 reading. It's like I'm always into reading, but right now I'm super into reading. In June I read literary fiction and non-fiction and poetry and romance fiction and a chunky classic. Let's talk about them. So the first book I read in June was Outlandish by Jo Clement. This is a new poetry collection from the fab indie poetry publisher Blood Axe Books, primarily exploring British Gypsy and Roma culture. This collection forces you to consider themes of otherness and trespass, really bringing to light this hidden and threatened culture. This poetry collection paints such a vivid, striking picture. When I think about this collection, I immediately see colour. I see the wildness of nature, I see these ancient stopping places and council estates. This is extremely lyrical poetry. I really enjoyed the reading experience. I personally loved the dialect that came through in here, the northern English words that were incorporated. I myself am from the north of England, so I did recognise some of the phrases in here from my own family, which was super nice. That being said, you don't need to know all of these words. I do think this is really accessible and readable poetry. This collection just really gave me a sense of these people and their culture and their places, and that is exactly what I wanted. If this interests you, or even if you're just open to reading about this culture, I would highly recommend this collection, and in the end I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read Under the Rainbow by Celia Lasky. Set in Kansas, this novel tells the story of a group of LGBTQIA+ activists who moved to the most homophobic town in the US for a 2-year social experiment. I really enjoyed this book. I read this so quickly. Firstly, this premise just had me. This group of queer activists moving from all over to this small Kansas town where everyone knows one another and seemingly has the same views. I love me a small town setting to a book. I just love exploring characters and dynamics and mindsets. It fascinates me. You get to meet a whole range of characters in here. Every chapter is from a different character's perspective, some from the community and some from the group. I ate this up. I loved seeing everyone's personal stories, but how all of the different stories ended up entwining. There were a lot of really interesting perspectives in here. It feels kind of messy, because these things are kind of messy. This was really fun. It was full of tension and secrets and wit and heartfelt moments, everything you would want. Super readable, but also makes you pause and think. So in the end, I gave it 4.5 stars. Next up, in June, I read Northerners, A History by Brian Groom. This is a new non-fiction book, a biography of Northern England from the earliest times to modern present day. It is published by the proud northern publisher Harper North, and I don't actually have a copy with me right now because I'm lending it to my mum. So I am from the north of England and I totally loved this. It was honestly exactly what I wanted it to be. It's perfectly paced, giving you just the right amount of information throughout to keep you interested. It covers a whole range of topics and people who have contributed to shaping the north of England. I did know quite a few things in here, but I also learned a lot too. Either way, it was really nice to have it all here in one contained, entertaining package. While this is informative and insightful, more than anything, you can just feel the warmth in here. You can really feel the love for the north throughout. Super enjoyable and super consumable. I would highly recommend it to anyone interested. So in the end, I gave it 4 stars. Next up, I picked up Lurex by Denise Riley. This is the newest poetry collection from the highly celebrated poet Denise Riley. It's described as being at once deeply personal and sharply political, political and exploring just that intersection. So Denise Riley is clearly a very competent poet. You can tell that she has a lot of experience writing these collections. This was my first experience reading her poetry and I did really enjoy it. There is almost so much going on in here that I'm actually struggling to sum it up. There are autobiographical sequences in here, there are reflections on the poetic craft itself, there's philosophy. I found this to be witty and intelligent and quite powerful. A few of the poems were really striking. That being said, there were definitely also poems in here that I felt were going over my head. There were certainly poems that I didn't connect with personally or intellectually. I just couldn't pull anything out of them. So this was an interesting reading experience for me. Some of the poems really worked for me and really blew me away, and others I just didn't get anything from. In the end, I gave this one 3 stars, and I will definitely be open to reading more Denise Riley in the future. Next in June, I read Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. Set during the early 19th century, this is a chunky Victorian classic novel that tells the story of 17-year-old Molly Gibson, whose father remarries, bringing into her life a vain and manipulative stepmother and a glamorous stepsister. There's reputations at stake, moral conundrums, and of course, complex love affairs. I love Elizabeth Gaskell so much. I first read North and South by her a couple of years ago and immediately fell in love. There is something about her prose that I just get. It is so readable and enjoyable. It just makes sense in my brain. This one in particular is such a well-rounded and entertaining novel. I love the small, watchful English countryside town setting. The wider cast of characters in here are eclectic and so entertaining. Molly herself is a delightful heroine. We see her come of age, figure out who she is and where she stands on things. We see her navigate all sorts of relationships. While this novel is fueled by romantic relationships and the relationship between Molly and her stepmother and stepsister, this is also highly political. It offers an ironic, witty critique of mid-Victorian society, which I am always here for. This is just a dream of a book. It is so fun and accomplished. I did give this 5 out of 5 stars, but we have to address this. How annoying is it that this book isn't finished? Elizabeth Gaskell really had to go and die before she gave us the concluding chapters. Next up in June, I read Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is a contemporary romance novel telling the story of 2 rival writers who meet one summer. January is a writer of rom-coms. She is a hopeless romantic, and Guy doesn't believe that true love exists and writes serious literary fiction. As they both encounter writer's block, they decide to swap genres and see who can get published first. If you saw my massive 6-month booktube break recent reads video, you will know that I have recently been getting into romance fiction. I have discovered that it exists and it's brilliant. As such, I've been working my way through all of the big names, arguably the most famous of which at the moment is Emily Henry. So I enjoyed this. The central relationship was entertaining to follow. I liked both main characters. Their witty, snarky, sexy dialogue was genuinely good. It had me hanging on their every word. Although I did find that my investment in their relationship did dip in the second half. I really enjoyed the summer setting. I loved the rival writers to lovers thing. I was totally here for that. So overall, I found this to be very readable. That being said, I did want more from this book, specifically when it came to the side characters. This setup here held so much promise for me. The seaside and the local bookshop and all of the characters we get to meet in the community. It really felt as though we were going to get to know these people and places much more. but it very quickly just turned into chapter after chapter of dialogue between the two main characters, which I found to be really jarring. All I'm saying is there was scope here for a much more well-rounded and convincing story that also would have added depth to the central relationship. So yeah, this was enjoyable. I can see that Emily Henry can write, especially when it comes to dialogue. I will definitely be reading more by her soon, and I do hear that her newer novels are better. So in the end, I gave this one 3.5 stars. The penultimate book I read in June was Space Baby by Susanna Evans. This is a new poetry collection by Nine Arches Press. I believe it is Susanna Evans' second collection. It is a speculative dystopian book asking difficult questions about the future of Earth and its beings. Ultimately, it's about responsibility and interconnectedness and how we can find joy on a ruined planet. So I really enjoyed this collection. I just loved the vibes. I don't know what it is about space and otherworldliness and slightly bizarre philosophical questions that lends itself so well to poetry, but I am here for it. In here we have the first baby born in space. We have AI robots that cuddle you to sleep. While this collection is witty and pretty absurd, it's also tremendously serious, really facing you with this burning planet and our responsibility to future generations. There is a lot going on in here. I really enjoyed the whole experience. The imagery is startling and beautiful. It made me feel a whole range of emotions. So in the end, I gave this one 4 stars. And the final book that I read in June was None of This Is Serious by Catherine Prasifka. This is a new literary novel that tells the story of a young woman who's finishing up university in Dublin. Dublin, shock horror. Her life is full of insecurity and uncertainty, and then a massive crack appears in the sky. So ending on a pretty down note here, because this book was not for me. So firstly, this whole crack thing set up an interesting idea. We have social media, online madness, and anxiety about the future, all in the face of this impending world doom. But it just didn't come through at all for me. Catherine Prasifka just didn't use this to any interesting end. The main character was boring. She didn't offer me anything. Same with the side characters. They all felt quite clumsy. This all just felt a bit forced for me. A bit placed. There were clearly ideas about social media and millennials and the housing crisis and sexual assault that the author wanted to get in, but it just ended up feeling as though the book was molded around these ideas rather than them coming out of the story organically. That all being said, it is probably worth noting that this isn't particularly my thing. I don't tend to like books that explore social media prominently. I just don't really enjoy it. And I also don't really love the college, lots of parties, lots of drinking thing. This wasn't offensive or terribly written, but honestly it kind of gave me nothing. So in the end, I gave this one 1.5 stars. So there we have it. Those were all of the books that I read in June. Quite a poetry heavy month for me, I'm just realizing. I really hope you guys enjoyed hearing about all of these books. As always, please let me know if you've read any of them. Also, definitely let me know what you read in June. Tell me the best and the worst book you read in June. Thank you so much for watching, as always, everyone. I really, really appreciate it. I hope you're all well. I hope your weeks are going well, and I will hopefully see you really soon in another one. Bye.